There's a sound many of us hear every night, a sound we so easily dismiss as a joke, a domestic punchline, or a mere annoyance. But as a neurologist, I am here to tell you that this sound, in millions of bedrooms across the world, is often the final, desperate precursor to a catastrophic brain event. What you and society have been trained to think of as just loud snoring could very well be the last audible warning your body is capable of giving you before a stroke. And the insidious damage, the slow, silent erosion of your brain, begins the very first night it goes untreated. I am going to break down for you the exact mechanism, the nightly destructive process that turns this incredibly common habit of ours into a ticking time bomb nestled deep inside your brain. I will walk you through the assault step by step from the cellular level to the vascular system. And at the end of this video, I will reveal the subtle non-snoring signs your brain is sending you during the day, signals that are its desperate, silent pleas for help. Missing this could mean missing your one clear chance to prevent irreversible damage to your mind and your future. So please, stay with me. This is more important than you can possibly imagine. Harmless habit. We need to have a serious conversation about the most dangerously underestimated sound in our society. It is the sound of snoring. For decades, we've culturally demoted it, turning it into a punchline. It's the tired trope of the bumbling dad in a sitcom, the source of countless late-night arguments between partners, a thing we complain about with a sigh and a laugh, but ultimately accept as a normal, if irritating, part of life. But I am here today to tell you, with all the gravity and urgency my profession affords me, that this thinking is not just fundamentally wrong, it is life-threatening. The casual acceptance of loud, chronic snoring has created a massive, dangerous blind spot in our collective health awareness. The consequences of that blind spot are playing out in real time in the harsh fluorescent lights of emergency rooms and neurology wards every single day. People are losing their memories, their personalities, their futures, over a condition they were told their whole lives was just a nuisance. They are suffering devastating brain events that were, in many cases, entirely preventable if only someone had listened to the warning signs instead of just complaining about the noise. That sound, that harsh rattling, that strained, gasping noise echoing from the bedroom is very often not just snoring. It is the audible signal of a body in profound distress. It is the raw sound of a desperate struggle for the most vital element of life, oxygen. It is the sound of an airway physically collapsing on itself and the brain, sensing imminent suffocation, sending out a powerful panic signal to jolt the body and force that airway back open. This is not the sound of peaceful rest. When you hear that specific, terrifying pattern, a loud, crescendoing snore, followed by an unnerving period of complete silence, then a sudden, violent gasp or choke for air, you are not hearing someone in deep, restful sleep. You are bearing witness to a repeated physiological emergency. You are listening in real time to the sound of obstructive sleep apnea, or OSA. And I need you to burn that term into your mind because it is the silent, treacherous partner to so many neurological catastrophes, most notably ischemic stroke. The fundamental misunderstanding is one of perception. We perceive sleep as a passive state of quiet rest, a time of gentle recharging, so any noise associated with it must therefore be equally passive or benign. This is a profound and dangerous error. For a person with untreated sleep apnea, sleep is the absolute opposite of rest. It is a grueling 8-hour battle for survival. Their body is not recharging, it is fighting a desperate war on multiple fronts, night after night, without a moment's peace. It's fighting to keep its airway from collapsing. It's fighting against plummeting oxygen levels that threaten the brain. It's fighting against the toxic surge of stress hormones that this struggle unleashes. And it's a war the body is destined to lose, night after grueling night, with the brain and the entire cardiovascular system taking on the most severe and lasting damage. This nightly battle leaves behind a trail of destruction that accumulates over time, weakening the body's most critical structures until they are primed for catastrophic failure. So the very first step we must all take is to consciously recategorize this phenomenon in our minds. We must drag it out of the annoyances column and place it firmly and permanently in the urgent medical warnings column. This isn't about getting a better night's sleep or stopping a partner from being noisy. This is about stroke prevention. This is about preserving memory and cognitive function. This is about recognizing that a symptom we have all been taught to ignore is, in fact, one of the most direct, obvious, and thankfully treatable risk factors for a major brain event. The habit isn't the snoring itself. The most dangerous habit is our collective dismissal of it. That is the habit that has to change, starting today. We live in a culture that has bizarrely normalized exhaustion. We wear our profound fatigue like a badge of honor, a testament to our productivity and importance. "I'm so tired" has become a standard greeting, a common complaint that signifies a busy, successful life. But for millions upon millions of people, This chronic, bone-deep exhaustion isn't from a demanding job or a hectic family schedule. It is the direct physiological result of the brain being starved of oxygen hundreds of times every single night. They wake up feeling as if they haven't slept at all because, in a very real neurological sense, they haven't. Their sleep is so chaotically fragmented, so violently punctuated by these apneic events and the subsequent emergency microarousals that they never reach or sustain the deep restorative stages of sleep, like stage 3 and REM sleep, that are absolutely necessary for brain detoxification, memory consolidation, and cellular repair. This isn't just feeling a bit sleepy, it's a state of chronic neurological deprivation. This chronic fatigue is the first layer of the condition's cruel deception. People search for any other explanation. They blame their age, their weight, their stress levels, their diet. They attempt to fix it with an endless river of coffee, with sugary energy drinks, with sheer, gritted teeth force of will. But they are treating a surface-level symptom, not the underlying cause. They are trying to power through a state of physiological siege. They are telling their body to run a marathon every single day after it has just spent the entire night fighting for every breath. This is not sustainable. It is a slow-motion, systemic breakdown of the body's most critical systems. This breakdown is orchestrated by a condition hiding in plain sight, a predator disguised as the most common and seemingly harmless of human sounds. It lulls us into a false sense of security while it methodically dismantles our health from the inside out. Think of it this way. If you saw someone actively choking in a restaurant, you would intervene immediately and without hesitation. You would instantly recognize the universal signs, the struggle for breath, the hands clutching the throat, the sheer panic in their eyes. You would understand it as a life or death situation requiring immediate, decisive action. Sleep apnea is a slow-motion, chronic version of that exact same event. The airway is obstructed, breathing stops completely, and the body panics to restore airflow. The only difference is that it's happening behind the deceptive veil of sleep, so the conscious mind is completely unaware of the desperate struggle taking place. The only external evidence is the sound, the snore that signals a partially blocked airway, the silence that signals a complete blockage, and the gasp that signals a panic-driven reopening. We must learn to interpret that sound pattern with the same urgency as if we were witnessing someone choke while they were awake. It is a distress signal from the depths of the body that we can no longer afford to put on mute. The true danger lies in this pervasive normalization. A partner complains, "Your snoring is so loud, it's shaking the walls." The response is often a defensive shrug, a self-deprecating joke, or a flimsy promise to try sleeping on my side. The issue is consistently framed as one of volume, of noise pollution in the shared space of the bedroom. It is almost never framed as what it truly is: a potential harbinger of vascular dementia, sudden cardiac arrest, heart attack, and, most acutely, ischemic stroke. The entire conversation needs to change, in our homes and, crucially, in doctors' offices. The question shouldn't just be, do you snore? The life-saving questions need to be, has anyone ever told you that you stop breathing in your sleep? Has anyone ever had to shake you awake because you went silent for too long and then suddenly gasped for air? These are the questions that cut through the noise and get directly to the heart of the life-threatening risk. And this risk is not some abstract or theoretical possibility. It is a clear and present danger that compounds with every passing night. Each individual apneic event is a small, cumulative injury to the brain and the fragile lining of the blood vessels. When these injuries occur hundreds of times a night, for years and sometimes decades on end, they accumulate. They weaken the entire system. They create the perfect storm of conditions for a vascular disaster. The harmless habit of ignoring snoring is exactly like ignoring a small, growing crack in a massive dam. Night after night, the pressure builds, the crack widens, and the structural integrity is progressively compromised until one day, with little or no further warning, the dam breaks. For the brain, that catastrophic break is a stroke. And it all started with a sound we collectively chose to ignore: brain suffocation. To truly grasp why sleep apnea is so uniquely devastating to the brain, we have to move beyond the audible sound and look at what is happening on a microscopic cellular level. The technical term for what occurs during an apneic event is intermittent hypoxia. Hypoxia means a state of low oxygen. Intermittent means it happens over and over and over again in rapid succession. So for hours every night, the brain is subjected to a relentless, punishing cycle of oxygen starvation, followed by a sudden jarring rush of reoxygenation. This is not a gentle process. It is a violent biochemical roller coaster that inflicts profound and lasting damage on the most oxygen-sensitive organ in your entire body, your brain. Let's be incredibly specific here because the numbers are staggering. The average human brain makes up about 2% of the body's total weight, but it greedily consumes a full 20% of the body's oxygen intake when at rest. It is an oxygen-hungry supercomputer. Every single thought you have, every memory you form and retrieve, every complex calculation, and every single signal it sends to keep your heart beating and your lungs breathing is powered by a constant, rich, uninterrupted supply of oxygen. When that supply is cut off, even for the 10 to 30 seconds of a typical apneic event, brain cells begin to suffer and malfunction. The very first thing that happens is a primal panic response. The brain's ancient control centers, located in the brainstem, detect the plummeting oxygen and the rapidly surging carbon dioxide levels in the blood, and they trigger a body-wide emergency alarm. This is a code red for the nervous system. This alarm floods the body with powerful stress hormones, primarily adrenaline and cortisol. The goal of this chemical surge is brutally simple: wake the body up just enough to tighten the muscles in the throat, break the seal of the collapsed airway, and force a life-saving breath. This is the loud gasp or snort that a bed partner hears. It's a brilliant, life-saving reflex. But here's the insidious, tragic part. It all happens so quickly and so frequently that the person sleeping rarely becomes fully conscious. They experience what we call a microarousal, a brief, almost instantaneous shift from deep sleep to a much lighter, non-restorative stage. They don't remember it in the morning, but their brain does. Their brain remembers every single one of the 50, 100, or in severe cases, even 300 times it was forced to hit the panic button to save itself from suffocation throughout the night. Imagine deliberately holding your breath until you feel that primal, desperate urge to breathe, that burning sensation in your lungs, that rising tide of absolute panic. Now imagine being forced to experience that terrifying sensation every minute or two, for 8 straight hours every single night. That is the lived reality of the brain during a night with severe untreated sleep apnea. It is a state of perpetual recurring suffocation. This isn't just tiring on a superficial level, it is profoundly neurotoxic. The repeated cycles of hypoxia and the massive surge of stress hormones that follow create a highly inflammatory environment within the delicate tissues of the brain itself, directly damaging neurons and disrupting the intricate chemical balance required for healthy function. The parts of the brain that are most vulnerable to this constant oxygen deprivation are the hippocampus, which is absolutely critical for learning new information and forming long-term memories, and the prefrontal cortex, which governs our executive functions like planning, decision-making, focus, and emotional regulation. This is precisely why some of the earliest signs of damage from sleep apnea are not physical, but cognitive and emotional. People start to notice they can't remember names or facts like they used to. They walk into a room and completely forget why they are there. They find themselves unable to concentrate on complex tasks at work that were once easy. They become uncharacteristically irritable, anxious, and emotionally volatile for no apparent reason. This is not a moral failing or a simple sign of getting older. It is a direct physiological consequence of the brain being slowly suffocated every single night. This process of nightly brain suffocation also directly and dramatically accelerates brain aging. Advanced neuroimaging studies have shown that individuals with severe sleep apnea have clear patterns of brain atrophy, which means literal brain shrinkage that are years and sometimes even decades ahead of their chronological age. The brain's white matter, the intricate network of nerve fibers that act as the brain's high-speed communication grid, becomes damaged, frayed, and less efficient. The vital connections between different brain regions weaken and falter. The brain literally loses volume and processing speed because it is being systematically starved of the one single resource it cannot function without. So when we talk about sleep apnea, we are not just talking about a sleep disorder, we are talking about a progressive brain degradation disorder. The snoring is the loud, obnoxious siren, but the real crisis is the terrifying silence that follows it. The silence where the brain is being starved, the silence where precious cells are being damaged, the silence where the groundwork for future cognitive decline, dementia, and stroke is being methodically laid, brick by brick. This is a nightly assault on the very tissue that makes you who you are. And it's happening under the cover of darkness, while the conscious mind is completely oblivious to the desperate fight for survival going on within its own skull. It's a terrifying thought, but it's one we absolutely have to confront. The brain does its best to compensate for the damage. For a while, it can reroute signals and work around the damaged areas, a remarkable property we call neuroplasticity. But there is always a tipping point. There comes a point at which the cumulative, relentless damage from years of nightly hypoxia becomes too great for the brain to overcome. The system begins to fail in more noticeable, more catastrophic ways. The brain fog becomes a permanent fixture. The memory lapses become severe and frightening. and the vascular system, which has also been under constant siege, becomes primed for a catastrophic failure. The suffocation of the brain cells is the first act of the tragedy. The vascular assault that follows is what often leads to the final devastating climax. Vascular assault. The deep connection between sleep apnea and stroke is not coincidental or merely correlational. It is directly causal. The nightly episodes of brain suffocation trigger a direct and brutal assault on the body's entire vascular system, turning your blood vessels into a high-risk, turbulent environment that is perfectly primed for the formation of a deadly clot. This is the precise mechanism that elevates stroke risk overnight. Not because a stroke will happen in a single night, but because the conditions for it are being actively and aggressively manufactured every single night while you are supposed to be resting. It all begins with blood pressure. Every single time the brain panics from a lack of oxygen, the resulting surge of adrenaline and cortisol causes a sharp, sudden, and violent spike in blood pressure. The heart is forced to pump harder and faster to try and circulate what little oxygen is available in the blood to the desperate brain and other vital organs. When this happens hundreds of times a night, the result is a state of sustained chronic hypertension, especially during sleep when pressure should be at its lowest. The blood vessels are no longer experiencing a normal, rhythmic, gentle flow. They are being subjected to a relentless battering ram of high pressure. Over time, this constant, violent force physically damages the delicate, single-cell thick inner lining of the arteries, a critical layer called the endothelium. A healthy endothelium is smooth, flexible, and naturally resistant to clots. It's like a brand new, perfectly smooth Teflon pan, but when it's constantly battered and stretched by high blood pressure, it becomes damaged, scarred, stiff, and inflamed. It loses its smooth, protective quality and becomes more like a sticky, scratched-up old frying pan where everything begins to adhere. This endothelial dysfunction is a critical, non-negotiable step on the path to stroke. It creates a rough, welcoming surface where cholesterol, fats, and other substances in the blood can easily latch on, forming dangerous atherosclerotic plaques. These plaques progressively narrow the arteries, restricting vital blood flow to the brain. But the ruthless assault doesn't stop there. The intermittent hypoxia itself is a powerful trigger for body-wide systemic inflammation. The body perceives the constant oxygen deprivation as a continuous, unending injury and responds by flooding the entire system with inflammatory molecules called cytokines. This chronic inflammation further damages the blood vessel walls, making them even more unstable and prone to dangerous plaque formation. It's a terrifyingly vicious cycle. The apnea causes high blood pressure, which damages the vessels. The damage incites a powerful inflammatory response, which makes the vessels even more damaged, and sticky, which in turn makes them even more susceptible to the damaging effects of high blood pressure. This creates the perfect storm for an ischemic stroke, which is a stroke caused by a blockage, accounting for about 87% of all strokes. There are two primary ways this can happen in the specific context of sleep apnea. First, a plaque in one of the crucial carotid arteries in the neck or in one of the smaller arteries deep within the brain can grow so large that it eventually completely blocks the vessel like a clogged pipe. Second, and often more suddenly and catastrophically, the combination of high pressure and inflammation can cause one of these plaques to become unstable and rupture. The body, perceiving this rupture as a fresh injury, rushes to form a blood clot to heal it. But this life-saving clot can then block the artery at the site of the rupture. Or, even more commonly, it can break off, travel downstream through the bloodstream, and lodge in a smaller artery in the brain, instantly cutting off the blood and oxygen supply to a part of the brain. This is the event. This is the stroke. And the risk of this happening is profoundly elevated during the night and in the vulnerable early morning hours for people with untreated sleep apnea, precisely because that is when their body is in this state of maximum vascular stress. Their blood is physically thicker and more prone to clotting. Their blood pressure is at its most volatile and extreme. Their blood vessels are at their most inflamed and fragile. They are literally sleeping in a prothrombotic, pro-stroke state. The body's time of supposed rest has been horrifically transformed into its time of greatest danger. Furthermore, sleep apnea doesn't just promote the formation of these dangerous clots, it also actively impairs the body's natural ability to dissolve them. The body has an elegant built-in clot-busting system to deal with small, incidental clots. But the chronic inflammation and endothelial dysfunction caused by sleep apnea can make this critical safety system far less effective. So not only are you more likely to form a life-threatening clot, you are simultaneously less able to get rid of it once it has formed. You are essentially disabling your own safety mechanisms at the very same time you are ramping up the primary threat. This is not a small or negligible increase in risk. Rigorous scientific research has repeatedly shown that severe, untreated sleep apnea can increase the risk of stroke by 2 to 4 times, which is a risk elevation on par with more widely recognized and feared factors like chronic high blood pressure or atrial fibrillation. The critical difference is many people know they have high blood pressure. Very few people are aware that they have severe sleep apnea. It is the hidden risk factor, the silent partner in countless neurological tragedies. The vascular assault is real, it is relentless, and it is happening every single night that the condition goes untreated. It turns the sanctuary of your bed into the front line of a war against your own brain. Because the most dramatic and obvious symptom of sleep apnea, the loud, gasping snore, happens while we are unconscious and unaware. The brain has other, more subtle ways of signaling for help. It sends out a series of distress signals during our waking hours, clues that are all too often misinterpreted or dismissed as just part of the normal stress and strain of modern life. Recognizing these hidden clues is absolutely critical, especially for those who live alone and don't have a partner to report on their nightly breathing patterns. These are your brain's desperate attempts to tell you that it is being damaged. We need to learn to speak its language. The first and most common clue is the chronic morning headache. People wake up with a dull, pressing, throbbing headache, particularly in the front of their head or temples. They blame their pillow, dehydration from the day before, or stress from work. But there is a specific physiological reason for this particular type of headache. During the night, the repeated episodes of stopped breathing cause carbon dioxide levels in the blood to rise dangerously. To compensate for this, the blood vessels in and around the brain dilate or widen in a desperate attempt to get more blood flow and more oxygen to the starving brain tissue. This pressure and dilation of the cerebral arteries is what causes the distinct headache you feel upon waking. It is a direct physical sign of the extreme vascular stress your brain was under all night. If you consistently wake up with a headache that mysteriously tends to fade after you've been up and breathing normally for an hour or two, that is a massive red flag. The second hidden clue is a profound and often unexplained change in mood, particularly a sharp spike in irritability, anxiety, or even symptoms of depression. Your emotional state is not just a matter of psychology, it is deeply and inextricably rooted in your brain chemistry and function. The prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, two key brain areas for processing and regulating emotions, are exquisitely sensitive to oxygen deprivation. When they are repeatedly starved of oxygen and then bombarded with a flood of stress hormones all night long, their ability to function properly is severely compromised. This can manifest as a dangerously short fuse, a feeling of being constantly on edge, sudden and overwhelming bouts of sadness, or a generalized, free-floating anxiety that has no clear external cause. It's not a character flaw, it is a neurological symptom. Your brain is losing its ability to regulate your emotions because it is being systematically injured every night. The third, and for many, the most frightening clue, is the insidious onset of severe brain fog and troubling memory problems. This goes far beyond occasionally forgetting where you put your keys. This is a persistent, pervasive feeling of mental haze, a frustrating struggle to find the right words in a conversation, a noticeable and alarming decline in your short-term memory, and a crippling inability to focus on tasks that require sustained mental effort. The hippocampus, the seahorse-shaped structure deep in the brain that is central to memory formation and retrieval, is one of the most metabolically active and therefore most oxygen-hungry parts of the brain. When it is subjected to nightly intermittent hypoxia, its function degrades with alarming speed. You are not just getting old or losing your mind, you are experiencing the direct cognitive fallout of your brain being starved of its most essential fuel. These clues, the morning headaches, the uncharacteristic irritability, the persistent brain fog, are not separate, unrelated issues. They are a coherent constellation of symptoms pointing directly to a single, powerful underlying cause. They are the daily, waking evidence of the nightly trauma. And very often, the first person to notice this entire pattern is not the individual themselves, but their partner. This is a point I must make with extreme emphasis. If you are the person lying awake at night, listening to your partner's breathing, stop and start, if you find yourself nudging them, feeling a jolt of panic when they go silent for too long, your concern is not an annoyance. It is a vital, potentially life-saving observation. You might be tempted to downplay it. You don't want to nag, you don't want to seem overly worried or controlling, but you are the only witness to the primary event. When you tell your partner, "I'm worried because I hear you stop breathing when you sleep," you are not just complaining about the noise that's keeping you awake. You are acting as their primary diagnostic tool. You are their human early warning system. Your testimony is often the single most important piece of information that will motivate them to seek help and lead to a diagnosis. You hold a profound and unique power to protect the person you love, and I implore you to use it. Frame it not as an accusation, but as a plea born of deep love and genuine concern for their health and their future with you. We must all become better detectives of our own health and the health of those we love. We must learn to look past the obvious and connect the dots that seem unrelated. Is the profound exhaustion you feel truly more than just being busy? Is the headache you wake up with almost every morning more than just a bad night's sleep? Is the irritability and brain fog you're experiencing a sign of something deeper and more physiological than just stress? These are not random, disconnected symptoms. They are a coherent message from a brain in distress. They are the hidden clues that, once understood, can empower you to seek help before the damage becomes permanent and irreversible. Listen to your brain. It is trying to tell you something incredibly important. Reclaim safety. After everything we have discussed, the nightly brain suffocation, the relentless vascular assault, the subtle and hidden neurological clues, it would be easy and perfectly understandable to feel a sense of profound fear or even hopelessness. But I need you to understand that the entire purpose of this message is the exact opposite. This is a message of profound hope and tangible empowerment. Because unlike so many other risk factors for stroke and cognitive decline, severe sleep apnea is not a life sentence. It is one of the most clearly identifiable and effectively treatable conditions in all of neurology and sleep medicine. The path from a state of extreme risk to one of reclaimed safety is clearer and more accessible than you might think. The very first step on this path is getting a proper diagnosis. This is not based on guesswork or a simple online questionnaire. The gold standard for diagnosing sleep apnea is an overnight sleep study, technically called a polysomnogram. The idea of a sleep study can be intimidating for some. They imagine being hooked up to 1,000 wires in a cold, sterile lab environment. But the reality is much more comfortable, and the information it provides is absolutely invaluable. During the study, a series of non-invasive sensors will monitor your brain waves, your heart rate, your blood oxygen levels, your breathing patterns, and your body movements while you sleep. This incredibly rich data allows a sleep specialist to see with perfect clarity exactly what is happening in your body when you are unconscious. They can count the precise number of times you completely stop breathing, apneic events, or have partial blockages with oxygen drops, hypopneic events. They can measure just how far your blood, oxygen levels are plummeting during these events. They can see how these events are fragmenting your sleep architecture and brutally preventing you from entering the deep restorative stages. The result of this study is a clear, objective measure of the problem, an apnea-hypopnea index, or AHI. This number tells you the average number of breathing interruptions you experience per hour, moving the condition from a suspicion to a certainty and dictating the urgency and type of treatment. For many, receiving the diagnosis is a moment of immense, unexpected relief. Years of unexplained exhaustion, mood swings, and brain fog suddenly have a name and a physical cause. It wasn't a personal failing. It wasn't a lack of willpower. It was a treatable medical condition. This realization alone can be incredibly validating and is the first empowering step toward taking back control of your health. And importantly, with the advancement of technology, many sleep studies can now be done conveniently in the comfort of your own home, making the diagnostic process more accessible and less intimidating than ever before. There is no reason to fear the diagnosis. You should only fear the consequences of avoiding it. Once diagnosed, the primary and most effective treatment for moderate to severe obstructive sleep apnea is continuous positive airway pressure, or CPAP therapy. Again, the mental image of a CPAP machine can be a barrier for some people. They see it as a bulky, noisy, uncomfortable mask they have to be tethered to every night. But modern CPAP devices are a world away from their older counterparts. They are whisper quiet, lightweight, and come with a wide variety of incredibly comfortable and minimally invasive mask options, from tiny nasal pillows to soft cradle masks. The machine works on a very simple and elegant principle. It delivers a gentle, continuous stream of filtered, often humidified air through a small mask. This pressure acts as a pneumatic splint, creating just enough support to keep your airway open throughout the night. It does not breathe for you. It simply creates the gentle, stable support necessary to prevent your throat from collapsing on itself. And the effect is not gradual, it is immediate and truly profound. On the very first night of using a CPAP machine correctly, the entire vicious cycle of hypoxia is broken. The hundreds of nightly breathing interruptions simply stop. The brain is no longer being starved of oxygen. The blood pressure is no longer violently spiking. The nightly vascular assault ceases completely. For the first time in potentially years or even decades, the brain and body are given the precious opportunity to experience truly restorative, healing sleep. The change that people experience is often described as nothing short of miraculous. They wake up feeling genuinely refreshed, a sensation they may have forgotten was even possible. The chronic morning headaches disappear, often after the first night. The debilitating brain fog begins to lift, sometimes within a matter of days. Their mood stabilizes, and they feel more like themselves again. Their partners report with immense relief that the terrifying silence and violent gasping have been replaced by the gentle, rhythmic sound of quiet, peaceful breathing. It is not just a treatment, it is a restoration of life. It gives you back your energy, your clarity of thought, and your emotional stability. And most importantly, it dramatically and immediately reduces your risk of having a stroke. Treating sleep apnea is one of the most powerful forms of primary stroke prevention we have in our medical arsenal. It directly neutralizes the nightly mechanisms of hypertension, inflammation, and endothelial damage that lead to vascular catastrophe. It is an act of profound self-preservation. It is a conscious decision to stop the nightly war on your brain and instead provide it with the oxygenated peace it needs to heal, to function optimally, and to thrive. So please hear this final point above all others. This knowledge is not meant to be a source of anxiety, but a powerful call to action. It is a map that shows you the danger, but also clearly and brightly marks the path back to safety. You have the power to walk that path. The line between a normal night's sleep and a nightly medical emergency is far thinner than we think. This entire discussion has not been about spreading fear. It has been about providing empowerment through understanding. Recognizing this silent threat in yourself or in someone you love is the most powerful and courageous first action you can take. You now have the ability to ask the right questions, to seek a definitive diagnosis, and to embrace a treatment that can fundamentally alter the course of your life and your long-term health. Don't let what happens in the dark dictate the rest of your life. Your future, your memories, your clarity, they are all worth protecting. And that protection begins the moment you decide to take your sleep and the sounds you make during it seriously. It starts tonight.